Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there, and you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing today? Good? I'm doing good. I'm going to say what I said last week, even though this is not going to be out right away. But right now, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. So by the time you guys listen, Thanksgiving will come and gone. So, but anyway, happy Turkey Day, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, because this is what I call the home stretch of the year. And I was, as a matter of fact, I said it in my, the last show, which is, I was talking about it like, that it's almost like, I remember when, not everybody, might be old enough to remember. So I remember 1999 when everybody was thinking there was going to be an economic collapse because computers would not be able to understand the 2000 thing. And people don't realize, of course, Hollywood went and did all those doomsday movies. And everybody thinks, if you were a kid or you were too young to think about it or worry about it, that it was like, oh, that's a fringe. And this was a realistic thing. I mean, people, there was some real concern that because at that point, so many of our internal, whether it's the monetary, computers were so heavy into maintaining these infrastructures that there was a really genuine concern that the year 2000, somehow or other, and then nothing happened. And now, I think about that, and it's like 20 years have gone by. We're going to go into 2020, and of course, we've had a lot of things as far as technology is concerned. When you of course, hindsight's 2020, and you go back and you look at what was happening then, what's happened in the last 20 years. Like I say, I remember when the only people that carried phones were doctors, or they had those big block phones, or you had a phone, and nobody. And then the beeper thing came in. Of course, I'm aging myself. At once upon a time, only doctors had beepers, and then of course it was the beeper for the regular person. And people would make up all these things that you would put on your pager to kind of like what emojis do. Like shorthand for how can I put this on some type of code. And then little by little, we started getting those flip phones that you look at them now. You look at these old movies and you see these people with these big things and you're like, what? And then here we are 20 years later and everybody's got a phone and, you carry it in your pocket and people don't know what it would be like if they didn't have a phone, which I know what that's like. And everybody's heard me say before, yeah, I love technology, but you know what? There's something to be said for not being instantly accessible all the time. Believe me. But anyway, let's get to the good stuff, guys. Today I have a super, super interesting guest. I have a gentleman who, and I know because you guys ask me a lot about cryptids. Yes, cryptids. His name is Chris MacLeod, and he is, shall I say, earlobe deep among other paranormal topics, but into the investigation of cryptids. Okay, his website is Asheville. And by the way, guys, I'm gonna always put a link to this in the show. It's Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com. Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com. And Chris, he is the Director and Lead Investigator of the A.C.A.P.S. He has over 20 years of experience investigating cryptids and paranormal activities. And as a matter of fact, we were talking about this before we started recording, that he believes, as far as the studying the preservation of the folklore, legends, and and we've talked about this in other shows, that all these, once upon a time, people used to differentiate ghosts, cryptids, ufology. They were like their own totally separate fields, and now people are seeing that there's always like an overlap. And of course, whether it's older historical references, people are seeing that some of these things, contrary to what everybody thinks, that it's a modern phenomena, it's not. It's just that now you have to look back at it and read some of these, whether it's an old newspaper clipping or even old manuscripts, with different eyes. Chris holds a bachelor degree in psychology and a minor in criminology, and he's originally he spent a lot of his life here in Florida, so that holds a special place in my heart, because I always tease you guys about our Florida weather here in South Florida. Now he with the Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society, he works in conjunction with Joshua P. Warren. He's worked with him for many years, and of course to study fringe phenomena and discover scientific explanations for what cannot be explained. And he's also worked with Daniel Tiny Hurst, who's the co-founder and lead investigator of M&D Paranormal and Cryptid Research. And of course, he goes to a lot of these locations, basically to try to gather evidence if he can, or just sometimes to interview people, because a lot of times with these, when you say folklore, a lot of people think of the word folklore and it sounds like almost like urban myth. Yeah, but the truth is, a lot of folklore, not all of it, but a lot of it has a lot more truth than what people might think about. And the only way to get it is when you actually speak to people who've lived in an area for years, or in some cases for generations. But anyway, let me bring him on. How are you doing today, Chris?
I am honored to be here, Marlene. Thank you so much for having me.
No, on the contrary, it is my pleasure. And I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests. How did you get involved in this field? Did you have a childhood experience? What happened?
Well, I grew up in an old colonial home in New England, and I used to see stuff all the time. Strange things used to happen there. And it was in the Appalachian Mountains. And when I was a kid, I used to play in the woods all the time. I was always in the woods, and I remember taking a walk with my grandfather and one of my cousins, and my grandfather looked down and he saw this huge footprint. And, I remember I was a little kid. I was 5 maybe, and I remember putting my foot next to this footprint and it just being just massive.
Wow.
And my grandfather wasn't a small guy, and he put his foot next to it, and he kind of had this look in his eye, and he didn't freak out, but he picked me up and my cousin, and he went back to the house pretty quick. And he had a talk with my dad, and he kept saying something about the boss of the woods. And like I said, I was a little kid, and I didn't know what had happened. And as the years went by, my grandfather died pretty young.
Okay.
But as the years went by, I did, I always remember the boss of the woods. And I remember a couple of years after he passed away, my grandmother talking about how he had gone to Alaska for a year after World War II. He was a fighter pilot in World War II. And he just, he had a lot of stress, and he'd seen a lot. So he just wanted to relax and just kind of disappear and be a mountain man for a while. And when I found out he was in Alaska, and then I kept thinking to myself, boss of the woods, I remember putting 2 and 2 together and thinking my grandfather must have had some kind of Bigfoot experience out there, because when I saw that footprint, I mean, his eyes just kind of just bugged out of his head. It's like something he had seen before that had scared him before.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what got me down the cryptid path. But I'm pretty sure I would say I grew up in a haunted house, and I thought it was normal because all my friends, they all had these old colonial homes, and everyone had their own personal story about a family ghost, and a lot of my friends had been, their families had lived on these properties for hundreds of years. I had a couple friends that were original founders of the town. So they'd been there forever. Like their whole families had been there for it was a legacy kind of thing. Right. So we were always kind of just used to people talking about the house ghost or something like that. So it was always normal for us. And then, when I moved and went to Florida, we didn't have that. And I remember thinking, well, nothing weird ever happens here. I wonder why. So I went looking for it.
There you go.
And that's just a real simplified, watered-down version of how it shook out.
Well, let me tell you something. Whether it's Florida, it's like everything. Once you go looking, as long as it's the right place, you'll find plenty of it here.
I did not have to look far in Florida. I will tell you that.
Yeah, I bet. There's a lot of weird, and we were talking about it earlier. Down South Florida, in between the east and the west coast, you've got the Everglades, you've got the 10,000 Islands off the west coast. There's a lot of stuff.
Not only that, you've got the Gulf of Mexico, and then you've got the Atlantic right there, and it's just all this history. You got St. Augustine, and all the Native American folklore and history about the swamp ape or the skunk ape, and it's all right there. Florida really does have it all. I will say that.
Yeah,
we've got hauntings.
They were driving cattle out here because people don't realize that Florida's a big cattle state.
Huge. Look at all the horses. Look at all the equestrian stuff in Florida. People don't realize that either. It's huge.
Everybody thinks of the out west is where they have the cattle drives. Or they have. And out here they had their own what they call scrub cattle. These cattle that that was a big industry here for hundreds of years. Yes. Yep.
I was actually just reading about an article about a guy that was raising rattlesnakes in Tampa. And he basically was canning them for their meat and selling their venom. And he was doing that in the 20s and 30s, and he was trying to make that an industry in Tampa. So, like you said, Florida's had all kinds of stuff. And that actually led into a cryptid encounter. But there's all kinds of stuff that happens in Florida. The Mayaca skunk ape or the skunk ape there's been reports of him for probably hundreds of years. And we just, and most dogman reports, the early dogman reports always came out of Florida.
Right.
It was always all the early ones. Oh yeah, sure. There's some crazy werewolf in Florida. It was right when the goth thing was happening. Remember that? So all like in Tampa, that's where all the vampires were hanging out, or in Ybor City, and all that crazy stuff would go on, like Halloween. So I remember back when that was going on. That's when the dogman reports started, and that was in Florida. It was either it was in Jacksonville or North Tampa or off of Dale Mayberry in the swamp. Anything, but it was always Florida.
And I tell everybody that there's a lot of lonely roads out here, especially like if you're going east to west, like US 41, that you just go to the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, everyone thinks that if you get on I-75, it'll take you anywhere in Florida.
Yeah.
That's not true. I have been lost many times. Taking a side road, probably where I ought not have been, and looking around. And it's funny how you were talking about cell phones and beepers. Yeah. I remember I had a blue pager. Remember the blue pagers, and it was a clear blue.
Yes.
I had one of those, and I remember I was looking. Oh God, this was years ago. I had a convertible Mustang, and I had taken it, not too off road, but a little off road, and remember how the pagers were turned off if they didn't get signal, or they just wouldn't work. And I remember my pager wasn't working, and I was out there pretty good, but I was looking for some evidence. I was looking for swamp ape evidence, and being out there in the middle of nowhere, and then realizing that it would be so easy for me to disappear out there because there's just absolutely nothing.
Yes.
And everyone thinks Florida. I know Florida's population has boomed a lot since then, but the truth of the matter is, it's still a whole lot of nowhere out there.
Right. Well, that US 27 is like an old highway, and as a matter of fact, it developed it became known as Bloody 27 because there were so many accidents. But people don't realize that out there, they built a lot out here, a lot of those canals to drain the swamps. And they have found people that have disappeared years and years later. They find them because back there, these highways were so desolate. that if you went into one of these bodies of water, which by the way are very deep, that's it. There was nobody around to realize what happened to you.
Not only that, let's talk about what lives in the water. I mean, you got the alligators, you got snakes, turtles. So if you go in and there's a chance you're alive, chances are you're going to come out, if you come up on top, you're going to be something's lunch. So, no, I'm with you. I mean, I've seen it. You know, even when you go down Alligator Alley, I drove Alligator Alley once on my motorcycle, and I will never, I remember thinking there was a log in the road, and it was a snake.
Yeah. Well, no.
I'm honking at this thing. I'm honking at this thing in my little Honda, hoping it just goes across the street.
Yes.
You know, I had to sit there and stop and wait.
And you know what? After the introduction of these invasive species, like all these pythons and constrictors out in the Everglades, those things are huge. They get huge.
Those things, and aren't those rockhead pythons interbreeding with another python, and they're becoming like these super snakes? I mean, you know, I look at some of these pictures on the internet, and there's a snake eating an alligator, and I think to myself, is this real?
Yes.
Are they that big? I mean, these are alligators. These are dinosaurs, and they're getting eaten by another dinosaur. Yeah. So, how far have we come, Marlene?
Alligators, once upon a time, were the top predators.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was millions of them.
Yes.
You know, I've actually had the lawnmower. I was mowing a lawn by a pond, and I actually had an alligator basically attack my lawnmower. So I mean, they'll attack anything.
They will, especially, and people don't realize, especially in the mating season, that's when they travel to other bodies of water, and that's when you hear about people finding one in their pool or you know, the golf course.
I had a neighbor find one in their screen porch. It was a small one, but it was enough to freak him out.
Yeah, of course, people.
And you know, they don't really have a whole lot of compassion. They'll eat anything. They don't care.
No, they don't. But yeah, the people out there, even now, I want to say there's portions of it that's could be called no man's land. That, like you said. Oh yeah. You disappear, and if you don't have any witnesses, you might not ever be found.
Well, my friends and I, when we were younger, we all worked at a car dealership, and it was on the main highway. I mean, it was in the middle of town. But the back of the dealership, we used to call it Jurassic Park, because we'd take golf carts back there and roll around and just screw around and blow off steam. But you can get lost back there. And let me tell you something. There was times we had to, it took a little while to figure out where we were. Yes. And this is less than a mile off a highway. Yes. So, I mean, you can get lost anywhere. That's why when people, unfortunately, when people disappear, you never know where it happens. I mean, someone could disappear 5 feet off the highway, and no one would never find them. Unfortunately, it happens. It's sad, but it's true.
Yeah, out here, land is very flat. There's no landmarks, and if you've ever gone out in an airboat and you go out to the middle of these marshes, you look around and it all looks the same. All you've got is that's it. You get lost, and it's like good luck.
If you don't have a GPS or someone that knows where you're going, you're in trouble. That's just the way it is. I mean, and that's like, yeah.
Well, no, that getting to the point of when we talk about cryptids and not being sighted or them being, because they've got plenty of space. They've got a lot of area out there. That
people don't realize how much space is out there, Marlene.
Yes.
That's the problem. Here's a fact I like giving it is. Our country right now, it's as you said, you know what? I remember I had a huge party at my house. I had a keg of Bellhaven Ale in 1999, and we played Prince on a constant loop for about 4 hours. So I remember 1999 very well, but you had to put a timestamp on it and make me feel old. Thank you very much for that. Yes. So I didn't need that today, but thank you. I appreciate it. But people don't realize since the founding of our country, it is still 84% intact. In other words, with all our roads, cities, infrastructure, everything we've done, we've only managed to destroy 14% of our country. Yes. And that means the other 86% is still pristine and intact. Mm-hmm. So that's your national parks, your mountain ranges, all this. So there's these huge, massive tracts of land that are very, very easily able to sustain wildlife. Yes. So why couldn't they sustain cryptids? Yes. People always say to me, well, what makes you think, how come there's so many Bigfoot sightings now? Is it because of technology or we're encroaching? That has nothing to do with it, in my opinion. My personal opinion is that the population is just getting back to where it normally was after the smallpox epidemic. And let me explain. When smallpox hits this country. You know, a lot of people think and let's just take the year 1776 because that's a good one. Because when that happens, it's ravaging Canada, it's ravaging South America, and it's ravaging the West Coast. All right, but there's a book called Pax Americana, and it's by this brilliant author. Her name's Elizabeth Finn, and even in this book, and I use this as a reference all the time, she says that smallpox is one of the few viruses that will jump from a human being to a primate.
Really?
So if that's true,
I did not know that.
when we're coming over here and when the Europeans came over here and brought smallpox, not only was it just devastating everyone, including the Native Americans, what makes us think that it wouldn't devastate the Sasquatch population?
Yeah.
Because it's applicable to them if there's ape DNA. Now, if they've got human and ape DNA, don't you think that'd be like a superbug to them?
Yeah.
There's reports about northern Canadian Indians, northern Native Americans, where Sasquatches were coming into their villages trying to get help, and they were dying alongside the Native Americans.
Wow.
So, you know, you put all this together, and it makes total sense to me. And I could even say this too. You know, I'm a firm believer that Dogman is basically what was referred to as the Cynocephali. And if you look in the historic record, Cynocephali, Alexander the Great hired Cynocephali mercenaries to fight for him. I mean, so that's in there. If you look at Anubis is a Cynocephali.
Right.
So let's just say they, for some reason, maybe in their DNA, were a hybrid somehow. And they
human
there's some kind of DNA that makes them susceptible to smallpox. So in this country, not only did we wipe out the indigenous population of the human beings, but we also got the cryptids. And now that all of this time has gone by, their population is getting bigger and bigger. And here's how I justify that too. When we go and clear cut forests, all right, everyone says, oh, you're wiping out the natural habitat. Maybe for some animals, but what you've done is when you clear cut something, grass tends to grow.
Yes.
Well, what happens? Who eats grass? All right? Deer, small animals, they eat the grass. Well, when they eat more, there's more of a population for them. So when you have this huge population boom, whatever's eating them, they have a population boom because their food supply is bigger and bigger. So if Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and Dogman let's just say they eat deer. Let's just say they eat deer, all right?
Right.
I think now in this time in our country, there's never been more deer. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure at this point there's never been more deer.
There's so many protected areas nowadays, and because you know they also have these hunting seasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you're a logical person and you look at these facts and you believe and you have faith that there's possible there could be cryptids out there. You know, I'm not saying I'm the definitive end all be all expert on anything, but I'm just saying logically it is possible. And if you have that little degree of possibility, then why can't that possibility mean that these creatures are real? And that's why you have all these sightings, and that's why there have been so many more lately.
And that makes perfect sense. You know, let me tell you something. I think that makes so much sense, and people don't realize exactly like what you said. When you have, whether they're a predator or they're an omnivore, they, you know, they follow, you know, and this is, you can see that across the animal kingdom. They'll follow the food source. Especially I'm a huge proponent they migrate. I think Sasquatch migrates. Yeah. I'm actually, you know, I'm one of these guys where every investigation I do, I put a different cut of needle in a map, you know, and I'm looking at a map right now, and I've got another map where I've traced out migration patterns over seasons, and where I live in North Carolina, and in North Carolina, when we start to turn this time of year. Believe it or not, this is when I start to get a lot more reports. And what happens in the summer, I get fewer Bigfoot reports. And here's personally why I think. I think they go north. I think they migrate to Canada. I think they take the Appalachian Trail, and I think they go to Canada. Because let's just say you're a 10-foot, 1,200-pound North American primate. Do you really want to hang out where it's going to be 95 degrees every day? No.
And you're covered with hair? No. All right? Now, I honestly think Dogman's a little bit different. I think if Dogman is actually canid, that heat doesn't really bother them because they can pant, you know, and they have different ways of dealing with heat. Again, I'm not a veterinarian. That's not my expertise. That's not my field of generalities. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, it's possible. So that's why I get Dogman reports. Personally, this is why I think I get more Dogman reports in the summer than Sasquatch
Yes.
and I get more Sasquatch reports in the winter than dogmen.
Exactly.
So I actually think dogmen go south. And again, this is all just my hypothesis. I have no way of proving or disproving it. This is just, I've looked at the data, I've interpreted it, and I'm just using my own thought process. And I talk to a lot of people in the cryptid community. Again, I know we were talking earlier, but I'm very, very blessed in the fact that I'm one of my dear friends is a guy named Tim Kumbo Baker. And I'm actually starting a new podcast, and it's going to be called Cryptid Detectives with him. Okay. And I've had this conversation with him, and we're pretty much on the same page when it comes to this. And anyone I've talked to that's been doing this a while, and I bring this theory up, and they're like, that's actually pretty good. It makes sense because there are differences in sighting. Like if you go in Canada in summer, there's more Sasquatch sightings in Canada in the summer. Well, why is that? Because it's colder and there's massive amounts of food. I mean, look at how huge Canada is. Yeah. I mean, it's massive. I mean, so, if you put it all together and you look at it, it's a possibility. I'm not saying this is exactly what happens. I'm not one of these guys that say, oh, this is it, and this is the blatant truth, and this is it, and there's no other way it can be. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a possibility.
But that makes sense. Well, God knows, everybody's aware of there's a lot of animals that migrate. This is very commonplace. And usually driven by the seasons, the seasons.
Exactly.
Yes.
And where I live in Appalachia, there's deer year round. Mm-hmm. There's a food source year round. There's fish in the streams and in the lakes year round. I mean, it gets cold here, but there's still a food source. So I mean, and realistically, where North Carolina is, it's not too far to walk south. So if these creatures, I've heard reports where they say they do 50 to 100 miles a night in traveling. Well, you could be real south real quick doing that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it depends. So I mean, they could be in Georgia. Georgia has more reports lately in the winter than they did in the summer. So I mean, you never know. Anything's possible.
Right, and and I hate to say it, but a lot of people think that Bigfoot sightings is just particular to the Pacific Northwest, and that's not the case at all.
Not at all. Not at all. I think I do, and this is just personal. This is Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal. I'm also known as the Cryptid Guy, so if you see Cryptid Guy on the website, that's just another monogram for me. But on my Cryptid Guy website, which is basically linked with the Asheville Paranormal or Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal, excuse me. I get reports. In fact, I just got one today about a Bigfoot sighting, and they said it was almost impossible to see, and the only reason why I saw it is because they were looking at these trees, and they saw like this huge black shadow move, but it was so well camouflaged with the change. We still have leaves up here that are it's still fall up here and it's still changing colors. And it was so well camouflaged in the leaves that if it hadn't moved into the light, they wouldn't have seen it. And all they saw was a massive shadow. They weren't exactly sure what it was, but they knew for sure it wasn't a bear. And they said if it was a guy, it had to have been 10 foot tall. Yeah. But it was just massive. They said it was probably 4 or 5 feet at the shoulders. It was just massive. But, if let's just say this creature, let's just say it's like an Auburn reported creature. If the leaves are turning color, how are you going to see an Auburn creature that size? So this goes about what we were talking about earlier about how well these animals are camouflaged to their environment.
And also, and people see also what they want. Well, not what they want to say. I take that back.
Exactly.
What they expect to see. Okay.
Well, there's also pareidoia too. They see something. Not everything's a Sasquatch. Not everything's a ghost. I get a lot of people that swear something's haunted, and then we go in and look at it, and they say they're hearing a thump, and it's a water pipe. Or they're saying they got high EMF fields, and it's because their electricity is improperly insulated. So I mean, there's always, you can always explain anything, but sometimes the one thing you can't explain is exactly what you're looking for in the paranormal or cryptid realm.
Right. Well, let's say, and I agree totally with you that I think that these creatures are superior when it comes to camouflage. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But let's say if you're a normal human being, average height, and you're scanning for, you're scanning an area for whatever reason, even if you're not looking for a cryptid, you never think I'm going to look up at the height of 9 or 10 feet to see eyes.
Nope.
You don't.
Never.
But you're thinking everything running around on 4 legs, which is,
Exactly. Most people look down. They don't look,
Yes.
they look down or they look at their own view, their own level.
Yes.
They never look up or to the side. I remember Tiny and I were on an investigation one time. Tiny, the reason why I call him Tiny, Tiny's almost 7 foot tall. Tiny's not, he's not really tiny. That's just what I call him.
Tiny's not tiny.
Because it makes me laugh. But there was we did a comparison once, and the guys, and we had Tiny in about the same spot, and he goes, "No way! It must have been almost 3.5, 4 foot taller than Tiny, and it was almost 3 times as wide." So I mean, we try to get as accurate as we can, and if you have something that's almost 10 foot tall, yes, and 5 foot wide, and it's beelining through the woods, and you only saw it for a millisecond because it's so well camouflaged, it could be anywhere, and you'd never know.
Exactly.
And I think that's the big thing with cryptids. I think people go hiking all the time, and they probably pass these creatures, and they never see them. And one of the reasons is simply because they're so well camouflaged, and you're not looking up. You're looking down.
You're looking. You remember that
the ground.
That old
I find myself doing that when I hike all the time.
Predator. Yeah. How at the beginning they're not thinking of looking up at the trees, because it's like they're thinking.
Yeah, no one thought about the trees.
The trees, right? How long did it take them to get to go?
Human. Right.
He's looking at us, or they saw the shifting and everything, and it's and they were supposedly of course it's a movie, but they're supposed to be trained super soldiers, whatever. And even they were not looking up at the trees. And my point being that, of course, if you're a regular person running around the forest,
I mean, they're trained to they're trained to look for other human beings. They're not trained to look for an alien that can have camouflage or a cryptid. Now, I'm sure there's some unit somewhere that's trained to look for cryptids. I mean, nowadays, I'm not naive. Yeah, I'm sure there is, but again, but that's just a whole different area of expertise. When a regular person goes hiking, I'm thinking about, I'm in my little office right now, and I've got all my hiking equipment in the corner. Mm-hmm. I usually have it in my car, but, I actually cleaned out my car, and I'm looking at my walking stick, and just when we're talking about this, I'm thinking, I really don't, and I do this, I've been doing this for a long time, but I actually, when I'm looking for things, I stop and look, all right? But when I'm walking, I can't really look up at a higher elevation because I'm worried about falling over trees or rocks or roots or something, you know what I mean? So it's difficult to be in motion and do something like that. So if something's following you or something's in the woods and you stop and it knows you're going to stop and it's been watching you and knows you're going to look around, how hard would it be for this creature to hide or this entity that, it's easy. So, I honestly believe these creatures are highly intelligent. I think they can communicate with each other. And, I think if we look at the Native American folklore on Bigfoot and Sasquatch, they refer to them as another race of people.
Yes.
And they have their own language, and they're very intelligent, and, they used to be at peace with them. And then, allegedly, one of the legends is that Bigfoot basically broke a peace treaty and stole a young maiden. Right. Again, all folklore, but as we were talking about earlier, where there's smoke, there's fire. It came from somewhere.
Well,
so,
I always think, because, you always hear some stories of, encounters between humans and these cryptids that doesn't turn out in the human's favor. And then I think, okay, you know what? Sometimes you will, even animals, regular animals, if you get one that's sick or old, and I think that sometimes if they get hungry enough and desperate enough, I think those are the ones that sometimes come closer to areas that are more heavily populated. Just
right, because they're looking for an easy meal.
They're looking. In other words, their ability to hunt, let's say, like you said, deer out in the wilderness,
it's been hindered. Right.
They can't. So they got to eat. Hunger will drive you, human and animal alike, to go places or do things that are risky. And I think that a lot of these stories, sometimes that you hear people seeing them on their farmlands or even really close to their house, or even losing animals. Sometimes, not all the times, but I think sometimes that's part of it, is that you have an animal that's just really, really hungry, or, that just needs to eat. And let's face it, you got a hog or, some type of cattle or anything like that. And for them,
well, even if you're alone, if it's, let's just say you've got an older Sasquatch that's been injured and he can't hunt, or he's been disbanded from his tribe, or or the band he runs with.
Yeah.
What's to say it's not going to kill a human? We don't know.
Of course.
You know, there's a everyone talks about, you know, missing 411 and
Yes.
David Paulides, but the genius in David Paulides is this: all he's done is taken all these reports of people that have gone missing, and this must have been the easiest book in the world to write for him.
Well, it's
or these. I mean, I've got several of them, and that's all they did. They took all these missing reports, they filtered out looking for specific things, and they've written all these books.
Yes. Yes.
And it's actually brilliant because he didn't have to write anything. All he had to do was just put it in order.
Right. Exactly.
But if you look at these reports, the way he did it was brilliant because they were looking for specific criteria. They followed that. And, okay, these people are missing, never found again, but we found a boot miles away. All right. He never blatantly comes out and says what he thinks it is, and I respect him for that.
He does not. And let me tell you something. I've heard a lot of times where they're trying to make him like give us what you think it is, and
he'll never get it out of him. He's always, you know what? But we all know he's a Bigfoot guy. You know, he's original. You know, he's an original Bigfoot guy, and he's a very intelligent guy. And he came out with this idea, and I honestly wish I had that idea because Lord knows how many books he's. I mean, I've bought 3 or 4 from him.
You know what?
And I enjoy every one of them. I use them as reference.
He crunched the data, but he also found the pattern. It was like
he did, and that's hard. I mean, that's a brilliant. That's a stroke. What he did was a stroke, in my opinion. What he did was a stroke of genius. Because again, he's a former police officer. He takes his law enforcement background, he applies it into this. And then he comes up with this theory, and he just follows a scientific method, just like every good cop would. And boom, he comes up with these books. And
that's one of the things. And you pointed it out, Chris. He had a theory, but he has facts or data to substantiate the theory. He may not say what his conclusion is as far as what, but that you could say, well, it's just that I didn't dream of this theory. Hey, I have this theory, and based on X, Y, and Z, all these, of course, all this data. And I've excluded, like he said, suicides, animal predation, blah, 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 blah. And this is what we get. And then within that we have then all these different, anomalies that, of course, there's a bunch of them. And then you're like, man. And, one of the things also that I think a lot of people are intrigued by is when he describes how sometimes he's had difficulty in obtaining what people would think. Why wouldn't you get a report of missing people?
I will tell you something. I have personally gotten a FOIA. I have sent for FOIAs for this area, and I've spoken to the parks people. And honestly, I wish I could say different, but they were nothing but nice and helpful to me.
Yeah,
they were some of the honestly. They were just so nice. I told them exactly what I was doing. I told him who I was. I told him I'm the director of the Cryptid and Paranormal's. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting how to talk real quick. I'm the director of the Cryptid and Paranormal Society, and I explain what that is, and I tell them exactly what I'm doing, and I tell what I want the data for. And you know what they said to me? Hey, no problem.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can help you out. I actually had a guy call me back and say, hey, let me send you this one too, because this might help you out. So. When he said these FOIAs were probably, and maybe they were for him, but for me, I was asking for, people that disappeared on the Appalachian Trail. They sent me a couple of them. They weren't very good. They weren't very informative, let me say, but they were still there. And then I did get one. I can see I got one that was so redacted. It was just kind of like it was 3 pieces of paper with black lines through it.
I was like, thanks.
So, it was actually, and then the truth of the matter is it was so redacted and it was ridiculous because I actually found a newspaper article on the same story and it had everything in it.
It makes you wonder.
So it was just one of those weird things. Yeah. But again, it's just, I think it's who you run into. I mean, if you go in like a bull in a china shop, you might have different, but I try to, I just tell them straight up exactly what I'm doing, who I am and what I'm researching. And, and when you tell someone that, that you're the director of the Cryptid and Paranormal Society, they're like, well, what's that?
Yeah, exactly.
What's a cryptid? And I think, I say, well, cryptid, it's an undiscovered animal or an undocumented animal. I like saying undocumented simply because, I think it's been discovered. But they said, what do you mean undocumented? I said, well, it's Bigfoot. Oh, okay.
Right. Everybody
but that's why I had to put paranormal. I put paranormal in the name of my company simply because No one knows what a cryptid is. But when they see paranormal, they say, oh, maybe it's got something to do with something. And you know what? And I'm a firm believer, and we talked about this. In my experience, 9 times out of 10, the cryptid world and the paranormal world go hand in hand. Yes. It's just, if someone sees a Bigfoot sighting, chances are there's a ghost story somewhere. All you have to do is dig for it. And it's just one of those things. And I'm not saying they're connected, but it's just, one kind of follows the other, and it's vice versa. If there's a ghost story somewhere all along the line, someone probably saw a Bigfoot somewhere, or they saw a cryptid, or something they can't explain.
God, I can't remember right now. Who's the person that mentioned to me that there was also some type of tie-in or correlation between signs of dogmen and cemeteries, even the old ones?
I've seen that, and I've read that, and I'll be honest with you. I've got a cryptid report not too far from where I am right now, and it was a cryptid, and it was a dog man. It was a big one. It was an alpha type dog man. I mean, they said this thing was 10 foot tall and just massive, and it was hanging out by a church graveyard.
Whoa.
And it had been seen there 3 nights in a row, and it was by the church graveyard.
Okay.
Now, that was the first one of those I'd ever heard personally. I've heard these stories on different podcasts where they talk about, there's this graveyard correlation, blah, blah. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think it's just coincidence.
Right.
And realistically, here's my thing: is what's a large canyon doing around a graveyard? They're not. It's not like they're digging up stuff, because we have evidence of that. I just think it's by happenstance. I think it's a coincidence. Because there used to be the theory that Sasquatch used to hang around Native American burial sites.
Right.
And then that's been that's kind of dust in the wind these days. And it might be true, but I doubt it. I don't think they're paranormal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think they're a living, breathing creature. I don't think the paranormal has anything to do with them.
Right.
So I think that's just the way it is.
And, sometimes you think about, sometimes I think it depends, because, if some areas cleared, maybe they just might, and I want to say, I know that, I want to say that as much as sometimes they stay away from humans, there's also an attraction as far as.
I think we entertain them.
Yeah. That and when they see something, let's say obviously like a graveyard, because sometimes there's these abandoned graveyards that are really old, or they were a family thing and nobody's been buried there in years, but it's almost like if you've got any headstones that are up, or some sign that there was habitation there, it's almost like a tie-in to the humans kind of thing. And
it's possible.
They might hang out for that reason. And and of course, unless you're, nobody's in their heads to know exactly why they, and I tell everybody though, if you, how everybody says, if I ever saw Bigfoot, what would I do? Okay, but I get more scared of dogmen than I do of Bigfoot. Because I don't know, there's just something about dogmen that you always think, this guy, this creature could easily kill me. And I don't get that same vibe from a Bigfoot. I don't know.
But for the most part, they say, well, there's a big gorilla, and what's he going to do for his entertainment, or what are they going to do to make them? What if they have senses of humor? You know what I'm saying? What if they want to be entertained? They get bored maybe being in the woods all along, so they watch us, and that's why I think there's some reports about that specific area. How many times you hear about window taps? There's a Sasquatch tapping on the window, or there's one dragging its knuckles or its claws or its fingernails across the house, or it's banging on a house. I think they're trying to get a reaction. I think they want you to come out so they can watch you.
Yes.
Does that make sense? I mean, that's just my thought on it. I mean, maybe not for everyone, but I think a good part of that's probably what they want. They just want to be entertained.
Yeah. And one time I was speaking to this gentleman, Jim Smith. He runs the Alabama Bigfoot Society. And he's been gathering stories since the 1970s. And I remember he told me that, ever since he was young, he says, he had one come on this was when he was a teenager, come on the property, basically where they lived at. And, his first clue was because his dogs, he used to have a bunch of dogs, used to like wig out. And it didn't like take anything. It didn't like eat any of the animals, but it's partially, I think, like what you're talking about, where for some reason they, like you said, maybe they don't have anything better to do. And he even told me, he says that even the police in the area, sometimes they would have people that would have sightings, like they're driving, and they would of course call the police. What's the police gonna do? So he says
they know what's out there.
The police
They're
would
not
bring
gonna
some
go
of
out
these
there and
people
get- yeah.
over there, and he would tell me, he goes, Marlene, I had a couple of people that were so genuinely wigged out that they would say, sir, can we stay here until like it's daytime, because we don't want to drive back home. And he said it. He goes, Marlene, I can't say that what they saw or didn't see, but they believed that what they were describing is what they saw, to the point that they were like, please just let us stay here. Because the cops would bring them over, like, tell this man your story. He does. And he says people were like really truthfully, like they could not believe what they had seen when they were traveling down the road. And they were just even scared to go down and leave and have another sighting. I mean, forget an interaction. This was just a sighting while you're traveling in the car. And he says, and it was genuine. There was no like, and he says that, and he's been doing it for a while. This was, if you want to say, before it became, where a lot of people were, what I call reality TV time, or sometimes he says people were coming and they would be calling the police, of all things. Like, I saw this sighting of I don't know what on the side of the road, and there's nothing really anybody could do except take the information down.
Well, I mean, what else are you going to do? I mean, who else are you going to call? I mean, who are you going to call? I mean, there's no Cryptid Buster, there's no Ghostbusters that you can call.
There's
You're
no
going to
crime.
call the police.
There's no crime.
I mean, 911. Everyone, and it's like it's indoctrinated into us since we're little kids. If something happens, you call the police. Call 911.
Yes.
So I mean, I get that. I mean, I've seen things that I've been in the middle of the woods looking and seeing things, thinking I wish I could call the police, but they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just because it's just not going to happen. But I mean, and thank goodness for the police, because I mean, a lot of times they come out and maybe just by them pulling up, it scares whatever is bothering these people away, because they see something else. And I'm a firm believer these creatures know what a gun is.
Oh yeah.
I've got people. And again, as we talked about earlier, I'm definitely on a no-kill. I don't think you need to kill anything. And again, for obvious reasons. But my first reason is this: let's just say you're some yabo and you go out and shoot a Bigfoot. All right. Well, what if that Bigfoot is bringing food home to his significant other who might be pregnant, and they have two other little Bigfoots who are too young to go hunt, and pregnant mom's in no condition to go hunt. So what have you done? For no reason, you've just killed an innocent animal or whatever you want, an innocent being, and pretty much just doomed 3-4 others. Why?
Exactly.
Because you think you're going to get rich. Well, you think someone's going to give you $1 million for a Bigfoot, and even if someone did have a Bigfoot body, you think it'd ever see the light of day? I assure you it won't. So that's why I tell people, if you're dumb enough to go shoot something like that, you deserve what you get. Because first of all, I don't think you're going to hit it. Second of all, if you do hit it, you're probably just going to tick it off. And then whatever happens to you is what you deserve. I think if you're smart and you see something and you've got the opportunity to leave, you should leave. Don't stand your ground and think you're going to win. It's just not going to happen. The amount of power and strength in these creatures. And the other thing is, when you see one, there's somewhere else. There's another couple behind you somewhere. You just don't know it.
You just don't know it.
And people don't realize that. It's the same thing. I took a dogman report once, and it was a deer hunter, and it was in Western Carolina, near Tennessee. And he told me point blank he had this dogman dead to rights and sights, but he just had this feeling not to pull the trigger. And he said this thing smirked at him. He said it smirked. He said it was a smirk. It was just an arrogant. He called it an arrogant smirk. He said it was smug. All right. He said this thing was massive. It was type 1 dog man, or an alpha type, what I call an alpha type dog man. Massive creature. He said it was 9-10 foot tall. He couldn't tell because it was kind of hunched over. He said the arms looked he said it was the biggest. He said it looked almost like a comic book character. It was so well muscled, and it had these claws, and it had just huge, massive head. And it's funny, as I'm actually looking at the sketch he drew for me right now. It's on my board. And he said he saw its teeth, but it wasn't because it was growling at him. He said it's because it smirked at him. And again, he said it was smug. But what really got his attention when he lowered his rifle and he put his hands to his side and started walking behind him, he heard like a growl to his right, and then he heard another one to his left, and about 10 feet on both sides there was two more.
Oh.
And he just put his head down and just kept walking backwards.
Yep.
And they actually they walked him out. Like he said, he just put his head down, and then he got about 40 yards backwards, and then he turned around and just started walking. And he said they didn't make any noise, but he heard him walking. It was bipedal footsteps.
Uh-huh.
He got in his truck. He put his gun. He just put his gun in the front seat. He got in the car, or he got in his truck, and he was one of these old boys that he always backed into something so he could get out easy.
Right.
And he said he just got into his truck, and he drove off. And when he drove off, he didn't see him. He's driving for about 5 minutes, and he looks to his right, and there's one of them about 4 feet from his car, keeping pace with him.
Oh my God! Oh.
And he said it was the one that smirked at him, and he said it smirked at him again, and then just beeline back into the woods. So that's there's a guy named Dark Waters.
Yes,
he's got he's a cool guy. I like his stories. I don't know how much of a researcher he is. I like listening to him. He's got a cool vibe. I think he's probably a nice guy. Just from I've never talked to him, never met him, but I'm just assuming he'd be a nice guy. He'd be the kind of guy. I'm a cigar smoker. I like to go hang out and smoke a cigar with him. But he calls them the crypto terrorists, and I agree 100% with that, because most of the reports I get, if there's a lot of them are like they just saw it and nothing happened, but it's like some of them, it's like they mess with people, like they'll just scare the bejesus out of them for no reason. Right. And I've heard they've smiled at people, and I've heard that smirk before. Or it's like they get this real arrogance about them. And it just makes me laugh, because it's like, who's to say that's not true?
Well, it's a very human-like quality.
How do you know it doesn't? It's like, how do we know we're not their entertainment? Like, that's what they do. Maybe they're a bunch of guys and they're out and they're, it's a full moon. They want to have some fun. Let's go pick on some humans.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can, get them to freak out. That's probably hilarious for them. It's like little kids scaring someone. It's hilarious to them.
We're used to being at the top of the food chain.
Exactly.
And we get rattled when we see an animal that displays these human characteristics. Think about it. And
it's like you anamorphize like your dog.
Yeah.
Like pretend the dog's talking or something like that. But what happens when the dog starts to smirk at you?
God,
you do. You're gonna
a bunch of videos about their. Yeah, think about it. Everybody is fascinated by that. And the thing is also that, and you hear a lot of these stories from these people, or I want to say a lot of time, not all the time, but they're men that have been outdoorsmen and hunters.
Oh yeah.
And they are so affected by these experiences that then they have a hard time returning, like going out into the woods or after nightfall. They get very profoundly affected. Yeah. I
know a guy. He's from Eastern Tennessee. Hunter his whole life, grew up in the woods. Literally grew up in the woods. Like he grew up in a cabin. Well, it was more like it was a trailer kind of cabin thing, and they didn't even have electricity until he was like 15. I mean, he told him like if they didn't hunt, they didn't eat, stuff like that.
Right.
He had a dog man encounter that scared him so bad, he hasn't stepped foot in the woods in 10 years.
Yeah.
He won't do it. He won't go out at night.
Yes.
He actually moved in town where he was. He still got his original family's place, but he doesn't go there. He won't let any of his family go there. So no one's been there in probably 10 years. So Lord knows what kind of condition it's in. But
right.
he refuses, and I don't blame him.
Right.
If something scares you that bad, and you're smart enough to walk away, then walk away.
Right.
Because if it does, I'm also a firm believer. If these creatures don't want you around, and you stick around, they're probably going to have a bad time at one point. So it might be a territory thing. Maybe it's just their where they want to hunt. But if they don't want you there. Especially when it comes to dogmen, because I don't think dogmen really does a whole lot of migrating. I think they have hunting grounds.
Right.
But I think once they find a place they like, they stay there. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. What's to say that if they have an issue with you, they're not going to just what's it going to take? You think they can't just break into your house? You think your door's going to stop something that powerful?
I have heard stories of that. that people have sighted them, like not at their home. Let's say they've sighted them far, not like not at a distance. And all of a sudden, they start having sightings where they live at, especially if they live in an area that's kind of rural. And they're like trying to figure out, how did this thing find me?
I had a guy not too far from here right now, from less than 10 miles from where I am right now. He was hunting out off on the, not too far off on the mountains off the Parkway.
Uh-huh.
And he had a sighting. He had a Bigfoot sighting. And apparently he had disrupted this thing while I was eating.
Oh.
So he freaks out. He freaked out. He said he was about maybe 20, 30 yards from his truck. He just walked into this thing like he didn't know what was going on. He wasn't looking for it. He didn't believe in anything. He freaked out. He jumps in his truck. He drives away. He goes home, and he lives. He's not rural, but he's on a side road that maybe has two other houses on it, but it's back like a mile. So I mean, it's rural, but it's not too far from downtown. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's pretty much it. He said the next morning, he woke up. He was getting a cup of coffee. He flicked on the lights because he gets up around 5 a.m. And he looked outside, and he said there it was looking at him through the window.
Exactly.
And he freaked. He said he freaked. He said he peed himself.
I believe it.
He freaked out.
I believe it because you're thinking, okay.
When a grown man tells you they were scared enough that they peed themselves, then I believe them because that's their dignity. They're giving up a piece of their dignity, to tell you a story. Now, is it possible someone's making that up? Of course, but why would you do that? Right. Why would you take away your male status as hey, I'm a tough guy.
Right, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Exactly. You're making up a story, but you're making it up in such a way that you're being made to look like, hey, I saw something that scared me so bad that I peed on myself. That's like, okay.
And this was he's a good sized guy. I had a long talk with him, and he's not. I don't think anything else would have made him have an accident, but he said he just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was right there in his. It was 15 yards from his, window. He's staring at him. He said it was staring at him. He said he knew it was there. He said that thing knew he was there.
And I think that's that's the part. And I've even heard of people, like you said, that saying, ignorance is bliss. Like you said, all these people sometimes live in an area, and once they have that sighting and they're aware that this thing exists in that area, they like you said, they don't go out or go into the woods after dark. They start taking all these precautions, even though they could reason to themselves, this thing has been there all along, and maybe I just wasn't aware of it. But I think that what really wigs people out, and I'm going to say especially men, like you said, is because when you look at this thing, you think this thing could just kill me, and they wouldn't even find my fingernails.
Well, you know what? I always gave someone asked me, what would provoke an incident with a dog man, or if they're so intelligent, what's their modus operandi? And I always say, listen, if they were so dangerous and dog man was just so vicious and they were just bloodthirsty killers like some people portray them to be, why aren't they just wiping out cities?
Right.
Because if you had like a pack of dog men and they just attack a town, like in the middle of the night, and they just go through everyone's house and just, nothing but that would be very easy for them to do. And who's going to catch them? Who's going to stop them?
Exactly.
If they have this ability to, be bloodthirsty animals and just go slaughtering everything they see, I don't think they could do that. I mean, what could stop them? Think about it. I mean, say you had a pack of 30 of them, and they just attack something. What's going to stop them? Nothing. It's not going to happen. You think a door is going to stop these things?
Oh, no.
They can push them. I mean, they could rip your car. I mean, they could rip a car in half if they wanted to. I think some of them are that big. Now, again, I'm a firm believer that there's three basic types. I call them alpha, betas, and Charlie. And, the alpha, of course, is the big one. The beta is the middle one. And then the Charlie type is the smaller one that looks like a dog walking on his back legs. But the reports I get around here, it's always it's always usually the alphas. They're huge. They're massive, and they're usually very, very dark black to the point where they look like unbelievably like they just stick out like a black wolf. So,
well, I think that these things are smart enough that if for whatever reason, whether it's a dispute over territory, or even you have somebody that's stupid enough to be aggressive with them, like they're smart enough to, like, if they're going to kill you, they don't leave behind any carcass.
Because Because I agree with you. Because I've also had I've heard stories. I haven't had one where I've heard stories where there was a dogman sighting and a guy took a shot at it, and then someone goes back to see him like a couple weeks later. His place is destroyed. There's blood everywhere, but there's no body.
Right.
Or he just disappears. Like the door was ripped off the hinges, and it looks like something clawed it off or whatever. And I've had plenty of those. I mean, I've heard plenty of those. But you never know. I agree with you. I think I think they're smart in the way that they know that when there's one of us, there's usually more.
Yes.
And they know what those little long sticks that go boom at the end can do to someone. So
But they're smart also. Like what's that saying? No victim, no crime.
Exactly. But they're also those people that say they've shot them and there's nothing that happens to them. I don't necessarily buy into that. I think they're biological creatures. I think they feel pain. I think if you shoot one and you don't really kill it, you're probably just signs your own death warrant because it's going to come for you. Because I think they're vindictive, from what I've heard. I don't have any proof. This is just personal. This is my personal hypothesis after all those stories I've heard and all the interviews I've done with people and all the sightings that they've had. And and I'm just interpreting this, and it's just again my hypothesis, my opinion. I'm not saying this is a blatant fact. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's probably like any creature. If you hurt it, it's going to come hurt you. And it's going to protect itself.
And I think, they, based on some of the reports I've heard, it almost makes you think they have memories. Like, in other words, they know who you are, and they remember who you are.
I think they go looking for you.
Yeah.
I've heard reports, just like that Bigfoot report. I don't live too far from Tennessee, and I've heard many reports in western Tennessee where they, one of them was a guy that was hunting, and this thing chased it out of the woods, and he had this old Chevy, and he had an old four-wheel drive Chevy, and it came onto the road, and he tried to run it over. Like, he gunned it, and this thing jumped out of the way. Well, that started a whole storm for him, because this thing came after him.
Yeah.
He went, the next morning he woke up, his truck was destroyed, it was all clawed up, there was like I can't remember if it was there was a farm animal or something that was ripped up and thrown through the windshield, but it was not a pretty story. And again, I don't know how true it was because I wasn't there firsthand, but there's a vindictive nature in these animals.
Yes.
And there's vindictive natures in Sasquatch stories too.
Yes.
There's Bigfoot Bigfoot come for you if you make it mad. I mean that's
Yes.
That's any good old Southern boy tell you that knows that they've been dealing with boogers. You leave them alone, they leave you alone.
Right.
And that's I believe that. These like Kumbo. Kumbo grew up with these things, and he'll be the first one to tell you if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone.
Right.
Don't mess with them. Don't take pop shots at them. Don't throw stuff at them. And for whatever don't feed these things. Don't try to domesticate one of these things. Because I've heard these stories where these people feed one, they habituate them, and then something happens to the person that's feeding them, and these things have a hissy fit, and they go wreck to join up. So you can't. You're never going to have a relationship with these things. These things aren't going to be your buddy. They're not Harry and the Hendersons. That's never going to happen.
Well, and I've even heard of people that, and this is not somebody that goes out there and does tree knockings or calls. They like basically, if they live in an area that's like I said, rural. I've heard of them doing calls, and I'm thinking to myself, do you really know what you're calling? And basically, you're calling them to your doorstep. Like you said.
One time, yeah.
And it's like, and this is not saying they're going to be aggressive, but you really don't know. You really don't know what you're doing, or that call that you think you're doing. Do you know what that means in Bigfoot language?
No, you don't. And like Kumbo told me a story that he was practicing calling ones, and he wasn't thinking of it, and all of a sudden this big old alpha shows up out of nowhere and starts banging on his house.
Oh my God!
You can't. If you. That's exactly a good way to put it. You don't know what you're saying. Yeah. We don't speak Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. We don't speak Squatch. You don't know what you're saying. I mean, your little could be an insult. You could be talking about his mom. You don't know.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm a firm believer that the tree knocking thing, to me, and this is my opinion, it's a joke. If you go out there banging on trees, making all this noise, making these stupid whoops and yells, first of all, they know it's not one of them.
Right, yeah.
because no human's going to have the strength to get the noise out of the knock that they can get.
Yeah.
I think they hit it with such force that it almost makes probably a sound we can't hear.
Yes.
And I think that's probably what they're listening for. Second of all, no one ever is going to sound like one of those. You know, we don't have the lung capacity
not there.
to sound like a Bigfoot.
We don't have the lung capacity. That's what I think.
All right.
We don't.
You know, and I don't. We just can't do it. I don't think we have the vocal capacity, the lung capacity. And you know, so when you go out there making wood knocks and noise, all you're doing is kind of making a fool out of yourself. That's just my opinion. Now, I'm sure there's some people that can, mimic them pretty well to the point where, and Kumbo's one of them. He's been doing it his whole life. He can mimic them, but he'll be the first to tell you. Sometimes it sounds right, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what's out there. So, I'm the kind of guy, I go looking for evidence. I don't want to call anything in, because the truth of the matter is, do I want to see one, up close? Of course I do.
Yeah.
Would I like to take pictures? Of course.
Yeah.
But again, as I stated earlier, if I had definitive proof of these creatures being real, I wouldn't tell anyone, simply because I wouldn't want every yabo in the world going around hunting them.
Yeah.
Or taking a pop shot, And that's just my personal beliefs. That has nothing to do with the legalities of what that would bring down on you.
Oh God,
so I don't even want to talk about that. That's a whole different subject. I avoid that subject entirely. But I assure you, it would not be pretty. And that's why I think that people that think that they're gonna, we were talking about how much money this costs to do every year. Earlier before we were on air, and I think these people, they get delusional. They think that, if they find definite evidence or they bring in a body, they're going to be rich. It's not going to happen. It will not happen.
No.
That evidence will never see the light of day.
No.
That's all you need to know. I'm not going to go any further than that, but I assure you, it will never see the light of day, and whoever does that is going to have trouble. Huge trouble. Probably more trouble than they can handle.
Of course. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. And the other thing is, there's no reason to kill one of these creatures.
Right.
None. Even if if it's charging you, chances are it's a bluff charge. And if you've done something to aggravate this thing where it's going to kill you, what you need to do is just get out of Dodge.
Yes.
Because realistically, what I say, what I said earlier, I stand by. Where there's one, there's more than one. Where there's one, there's probably 3 or 4.
Yes.
And if you're smart, you just walk away. I hear these stories where people say, well, I saw it and I just took a shot at it. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Are you the big bad, you tough guy? You think you're tougher than this guy? You going to shoot him? Yeah. What happens when what happens when his big brother finds out you took a shot at it? Or his dad finds out you took a shot at him, he just happens to be 5 yards this way. What have you done then?
Well,
you hear these reports about people. You know how hard it would be to bend a 12-gauge barrel? And you hear these reports about these hunters where they find them bent up in trees and their guns are bent.
Yes.
All right? This is because this fool probably took a shot at something, thinking he was going to be this big trophy hunter, thinking he was going to become globally famous and rich beyond his dreams. And in all reality, all he did was sign his own death warrant because, he took it.
It's like you made it, these trophy hunters, let's say you go hunting for, let's say, a lion. Those are predators. Mm-hmm. They could eat us, but humans are used to, if I shoot a lion, everybody is going to scatter. Nobody's going to come after me. Nobody's going to hold a grudge because this is just an animal. But again, when you're talking something like this, that, like you said, that there's more than one and that they hold a grudge and they remember.
Well, they're highly intelligent. I think they remember things. I think they can, once they get your scent, I think they have an incredible sense of smell. I think they can track you. And that's just big. I can't even imagine what a dog man could do. I mean, how far he could track you.
Yes.
I mean, I can't even fathom that. I mean, it's just, it's overwhelming to even think about. I mean, how far can this thing smell,
And we were talking about it earlier, about all these disappearances, even though there's no conclusion made as to what is causing the disappearance. I'm not going to say each and everything, but why not?
Maybe. What if even if it's 1%?
Yeah.
Even if it's 1%, Marlene. That's still 1%.
Yeah.
That's still a lot.
Yes, it is.
I mean, I don't want to see anyone get hurt. I'm not trying to scare people out of the woods, but I'm a firm believer. I personally, when I was young, I was stupid. I used to go out doing my cryptid investigations alone all the time, and it wasn't until much later on that I had an incident where I learned real quick that was stupid, and I should not do it again. If I got out of this system alive, if I got out of that incident alive, I told myself I would not do this alone anymore. if I chose to do it ever again.
Okay.
And, I got lucky, and ever since then, I always go, and Tiny, God bless him, he puts up with me. He's out in the woods with me, and he's good. He's a good old boy. He was grown. He grew up in, East Tennessee. He's real good with the woods, and we just, it's a brotherhood that's been real beneficial for us. We've been very lucky with some of the evidence we found, and and it ends up being a good time. We always have fun.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, if something really bad happened, you got to have someone out there with you. And that's just, let's just say you slip down and you fall and you break a hip or something. You got to have someone out there. You got to. Otherwise, you're going to be scavenger food. You die out there. They're never going to find your body.
Yeah, depending on what time.
Honestly. No water. if you're injured and you don't have water and it's summer, you're in trouble.
Yes.
So I always tell people, always go at least 2 or 3 people. Always have, and something David Plighty said, and I agree 100% with. Always have some kind of GPS.
Yes.
Always have some kind of emergency beacon. I carry 3 compasses at all times. Before we go into an area, Tiny does more research into that area you can imagine. I do the maps and the directions. Tiny takes care of the history of the area. And we know our research. We know exactly where we're going to go. We know how far we're going in. We've got coordinates, and that's how you do it. You have to be smart because it's too easy to get lost out there.
Yes.
And that's why I always tell people, if you're going to do this, fine. I encourage people to go research. I do. But be smart. When I do my little gatherings at like at REI, I do something called Bigfoot 101 every 6 months. And I always tell people, it's all about safety.
Yes.
If you're going to do this, I encourage it. I want people to go out and investigate. I want people in the woods. I want people to be with nature. That's part of what I believe, humanity needs the wood. We need to be in nature. That's part of what we are. The only time I'm really calm and peaceful is when I'm in the woods. And I believe that's true for a lot of people. So I encourage that. But I also encourage safety more than anything. Always be safe, Know where you're going, have a cell phone, have someone know where you are, have the GPS, have that emergency beacon, have backup. Always bring food, always bring water, always bring like a medical. There's a whole list of stuff we go through every time we do any kind of investigation or hike. We both have enough. We've got food, water, ways to make fire. We've got maps. They're all waterproof. And we've got water purification. We're ready. If something happens, honestly, there's no given time. Like even in this, when we do investigations in the summer, everyone I go out with, they have a sleeping bag in their car. They have a tent in their car. They have they have food in their car. They have water in their car for at least 2 or 3 days.
Right.
Because
basically what you're doing is you're buying yourself time to get found.
Exactly. And we always tell people where we're going to be. I'll circle a map before I leave. I give my wife a map. I circle it and say we're going to be in this general area. If you don't hear from me in a day, call the park rangers and tell them this is where we are.
Yes.
Because something's happened. And your biggest tool out there is actually your cell phone because it's all purpose. You take pictures. It can tell you where you are. If you have signal, it's communication. So I bring that. And I'm not going to lie to you. I have my concealed weapons permit. I always go out armed. And we talked about that earlier. I'm not going to go out in the woods unarmed. And it's not really that I'm afraid to run into, an unknown cryptid. I'm afraid to run into two-legged varieties.
Oh, yes. I personally, I have my own firearm. And I also have a concealed weapons permit. And there's a lot of places that it's like, and like, by the way, and I tell everybody, I've got it clipped on my belt. I don't leave it in my handbag or leave it in the car. I have it clipped on my belt.
I've got a shoulder holster. I can have that thing out in less than a second.
And it's like, because exactly what you said. It is, people say, well, you're doing a paranormal investigation. What's the ghost? And it's like, I'm not worried about the ghost. I'm not worried about the dead people. It's the live ones.
I'm not going to shoot a ghost.
Yeah.
Bullets aren't going to work on a ghost.
Yeah.
That's a different story. That's how they became a ghost.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's why I'm here.
Exactly.
But yeah, you never know. I've been 8 miles in the middle of the woods and smelt burning wood. And I got news for you. Where I live, that's called a still. It's not a forest fire. That's moonshine. Yes. So those people. Hey, listen. I don't begrudge anyone. I don't judge. That's what they choose. That's their God-given right to do whatever they want. Legal or not, that's not my place to decide. I don't judge, but I don't want to make them mad either.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to get shot at for being in the wrong place.
Yeah,
So,
that collateral damage kind of thing, wrong place, wrong time. Yeah, you get, I mean, people don't realize even when people go on legend trippers or even, you can find yourself in a situation that has nothing to do with like whether you're looking for a cryptid or paranormal or nothing.
Doesn't matter. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes.
That's why there's that phrase, wrong place, wrong time. That's why, because it has happened.
Yes.
And like I said, I don't want to get into it with anyone. I don't want to make anyone mad. I'm there to do evidence. I'm there to collect evidence and do research. I'm not there to make anyone upset. But some people don't, look at it that way.
Yeah.
And and it's a deterrent more than anything. Yeah. And the other thing is sometimes there's a lot of bears up here. Sometimes they're upset. Sometimes they're they think you're in your territory. There might be some baby bears around. And I'm a firm believer that noise is enough to scare anything off. So if anything, as we were talking about earlier, I just if I ever had to use a firearm, I would just shoot it in the air first before I'd point at anything. Just hopefully the noise would be enough to deter anything. But as of lately, I haven't had to worry about that. So.
Well, and I tell everybody, because sometimes people when they go to these national parks, they think it. By the way, you can't control nature. Well, it's a national park. They've got everything in control. I remember back in the 80s, I went up to Yellowstone. And this was, of course, before they had that big fire that, did away with the hotel. Not the hotel, but the place we had to stay. And I remember before we went into the park, we had stopped at this little spot. And this was June. The snows were just melting to go in there. And they still had snow on the ground. And we talked to this lady. She goes, "Oh yeah, where are you guys staying at?" And we were not staying at a tent because I had read about people having bad situations going on with bears. But she asked, I said, "No, I'm staying in the country." She goes, "Yeah, every year we got a couple of people get killed by bears." And she was saying, "Because And I go, "Well," they go, "Well," she goes, "Normally what they do is they take the bears out of the areas where a lot of the people stay in their tents." But she says, "But of course, there's always people that leave the food out or whatever." Oh, okay. Well, we had that conversation. We get over there, and we're hiking, and there was a big lookout tower. It was like a trail, and you could see the lookout tower. And I remember I'm walking, and I'm seeing it's kind of like this red fur, kind of waving in the air, and it's a very unusual color. It's like a reddish brown. But they have very long, their fur is, it's very long. You see when it waves. And I'm looking down this trail and I'm like, is that a bear? There's this huge grizzly. And what I had seen was it was scratching behind its ear. And when the fur starts waving. And it was like right on the trail that would have taken us to this lookout tower. And we did and by the way, we had my daughter was 6 months old and we had one of those backpacks on our back. And we did one of those back it up kind of deals. So much for they're supposed to get the grizzlies out of where the humans are.
People, you know what, Marlene, people don't realize how big those bears get.
Oh my God.
They are massive.
They're huge.
They're huge.
Yes.
They are huge. And people don't get it. I always tell people, YouTube grizzly bears. Or Google grizzly bears and look at pictures of them next to people or something like that, and get a good comparison of how big these things are.
Yes.
And how fast? They run 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour?
Yeah, I've heard that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're huge. I mean, if you see one of those in the woods and it's mad at you, you're in trouble.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm with you. I would have been out there telling to see you by.
Well,
say good day.
and then of course you hear, and as far as for people to put in is a point of reference, and if you've ever seen a grizzly, which is a very huge bear, and you think that some of these, like you said, these alpha dog men are comparable in size to them, more or less, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And it gives
they're probably more. They're probably way more because they're more muscular. I mean, they're huge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I know their body composition is different, but when you see that, not on TV, not on the documentary, but when you see this in front of you, you're like, I'm toast. In other words, you're not going to get away from this thing if it decides to go after you.
No, you're done. If it wants you, you are done.
Yes.
Even if you're in a car and it wants you, you're done. I mean, these things can run up to 50 miles an hour.
Yes.
I think they can go faster.
Yes.
I just don't think they've really been clocked. Yes. I mean, if you look at the way they're built, I mean, they're nothing but muscle.
Yes.
I mean, they just. We found dogman tracks in an investigation, and Tiny's got like a size 16 triple E foot.
Wow.
And this track we found, it's on the website. If anyone wants to see it, you just Google or just go to Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com and just look under evidence, and you'll see these pictures. And you'll see this big foot, or you see Tiny's foot, and you'll see this track. And the reason why this track, it comes out like he's kind of backwards, but the truth of the matter is there was all this noise going on around us, and we thought we were getting surrounded, so we just took the picture as quick as we could, and then we kind of got out of there.
Uh-huh.
But Tiny's foot is facing north, the track is facing south, and the size difference is just massive, but it's nothing but a huge dog print.
Wow. You
can see the claws digging into the ground and everything, and it's just massive. So there wasn't a doubt in my mind, whatever did that had to have been at least 10 foot. It was huge.
Yes.
Had to have been. Because the strides it was making, I think, was like 7 or 8 feet. It was just massive.
Uh-huh.
And this place looked like a war zone. The trees were just destroyed. It was just a massive amount of carnage. We're not sure what happened there. We personally think this was our theory that I think there was a fight between a Bigfoot and a dogman because this carnage it started up a hill, and you can just see it was all fresh breaks.
Uh-huh.
And there was just trees smashed. I mean, there was claw marks taken out of trees. There's also pictures of claw marks or trees with just gouges ripped out of them on the website. And like I said, just go into Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com, and if you look in the evidence pictures, you'll see like these trees with just chunks taken out of them. Those are from claws. That again, the pictures were the best detail we could get at the time, simply because at that point we kept hearing things around us.
Right. And you're like,
and we started hearing growls. And I was like, okay, time to get out of there.
Yeah, I was about to forget the pictures.
Yeah, it wasn't bear either. Bears don't have there's no black bears. Black bears don't get that big. This was huge. This was massive. And when you see that and you know the power behind, there was branches, oak branches, 6 inches just snapped. And it looked like something had taken and used it as a club, because we found it and it looks like it hit something. It hit something with hair on it, because you could see the hair on it, but it was down at an angle out of reach. And like I said, all this was going on. But when we were trying to take pictures, it just looked, I think something snapped it off and used it like as a bat. It looked like it was used as a club to hit something. Again, everything was just destroyed. It was just massive. It looked like Superman had gotten in a fight with something else in there. It was just that's how bad it looked. I mean, it was all over the place. You could see where it started and where it went down. It was just massive carnage. So for something to take the ability to have the ability to do that, just the amount of strength and size is just it goes beyond what you can comprehend. You just have to see something like that.
Makes you wonder who won that fight, huh?
I have no idea.
No, I know, but it's like, yeah, it's like,
I hate saying this because it's unbiased, but I'm a huge, I love Bigfoot. I've never seen him. I've seen evidence. I've collected evidence. I think I've been growled at by him. I think I've had run-ins, and I just probably didn't know it. But I think if a full-size dogman and a full-size alpha Bigfoot got into it, I think it would depend on where Bigfoot got his hands.
Yeah.
If he got his hands somewhere around that thing's neck or throat, I think he could probably just rip his head off. But other than that, I think the dogman could just claw something up to the point in between the fangs and the teeth. I don't know. I honestly wouldn't want to see it, because it'd just be unbelievable. The amount of power and strength going on right there would just be unbelievable. I think even if you saw it, you would just go out. You'd have to think that yourself, is this actually happening?
Let me tell you, that would be something. That would be and people don't realize that sometimes, these animals, again, we could be talking territory.
I think it's territory. I think it's territory and food.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reports. A lot of reports say that dogmen kill little Sasquatches and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that there's probably a territorial issue.
Yes.
But I don't think these are intelligent creatures. I don't think they're just going to walk up and start slaughtering little things. I just don't see that happening. I think they're probably going to have a beef with each other at full size, but I don't think either Dogman or Bigfoot go around hunting little Dogman or little Bigfoot. I just don't see that happening. And the other thing is that there's probably, I think they have nurseries.
Right.
I think that,
I was going to say,
I've heard, yeah.
That's that, and you see that in the animal kingdom. If you're trying to defend the young,
nurseries.
everything changes.
I think, And let's face it, Mama Bigfoot is not something to be trifled with. I
Right.
mean, they figure Patty was 8 foot tall.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a small female. Okay, well, what happens when Patty and her sister get there, and her aunt and her mom, and they're
Yes.
watching the babies? So
Yeah.
now you got 5 or 6 8 foot tall, unbelievably strong alpha females that you've just made angry by getting too close to their baby. I don't think that's going to be a good outcome for anything.
Well, you know what?
I think, yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, as I've seen this, if you've got a female that puts out a call, especially if she's got young, it will. The males will come running. Okay.
Well, think about this. Let's just say you have a family unit. Let's just say you've got an alpha, female and an alpha male, and they've got offspring. All right. Well, if there's another alpha, or if there's an alpha male, and he's got junior with him, and junior's say a teenager, that's still an unbelievable amount of power.
Yeah.
So now you've called in, and I believe they run in family units. So even if mom's there with the baby, and let's just say there's another female around, that's still something you don't want to deal with.
No.
And so now you've got all this, basically raw power coming. There's not a whole lot that's going to stand up to it. Especially in the wild. I don't think I've read stories where people have seen in the Canadian Rockies, people have seen Bigfoot walking up a hill.
Okay.
And grizzly bears run from them.
I believe that. I could see that.
I believe, and that's because I think they're going to get stomped. I mean, I think that's what'll happen.
Yep.
I mean, just the power in these things. If these things can twist a 6-inch oak branch and just snap it with their wrist, what could that do to a bone?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So it's interesting to think about, but until we ever get real proof, we'll never really know. It's just one of those things. Those hypotheticals can keep you up all night.
Of course. Anyway, Chris, I wanted to thank you so much for having this conversation. It has been absolutely fascinating. Because again, for all we know, there's other things we don't know, and it makes you think. Are there some things that we should? I mean, to me, it's like the edges of this go off into so many areas of, like you said. I mean, where do these animals fall? They're not animals. They're not humans. As far as like what we consider human for ourselves, what are they? Where did they come from? What are their origins? And I think it would rattle a lot of cages sometimes to get that truth. So
that's why we talked about that. So I just don't know. Again, I'm a researcher. I'm looking for evidence. And if I found proof, I'll say again, I probably wouldn't release it. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's just the way I feel. I wouldn't want anything to happen to these creatures.
Yes.
And I think if you released evidence, I think that probably something would happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Hey, Marlene, would you mind if I gave my website?
Absolutely.
My phone number
On the contrary, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Awesome. If anyone would like to contact me, you can give me Asheville Cryptid and Paranormal Society.com. My phone number is 828-782-3766, or you can get me at 828-407-0046. And if someone just wants to send me an email to say hi, they can give me at Cryptid Guy, that's CryptidGuy 001 Marlene, it's been an honor and a pleasure. And if you would ever like to have me on again, I am a phone call away.
You got
Whatever I can do to help you.
And guys, I'm going to have a link to your website on there. And again, we got to talk some more. And I want to wish you the best of luck. Now during the holidays, the new year, and all your new projects, okay?
Thank you. And you know what, Marlene? If you're ever in Asheville and you want to go Bigfoot hunting, you just call me.
You got it. Let's go squatching.
Yes, ma'am. Happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays to you and all your listeners. And again, thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure. This has been one of the nicest interviews I've ever had, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Keep believing, my friends.
Yes,
Keep believing.
of course. Bye-bye, darling. Take care.
Thank you.
And that is such a great conversation. We talked so much here before we got rolling because he's just got so much information, so much interesting stuff. about, how can I say, this, I want to say it's controversial, but not controversial. This area about the cryptids, people want to believe, they don't want to believe that, the people that want to believe, but they don't want to be like, they're like, man, this is too out there. And we were even talking about, how this would shake up people's reality, if whether it's a dog man or Bigfoot or any of these cryptids. We're talking here cryptids. I mean, like I said, the paranormal field encompasses a lot of it. And he made a good point. There's a lot of people, of course, that would totally wig out, because that would open Pandora's box as to what else out there is supposed to be mythical or like woo woo, and it actually exists. Like, oh, but we were talking about what would really, for all the that we always get from the science field, like, well, we'll believe you once you produce proof. And it makes you think, are they really, if somebody ever really produced true proof, whatever, a carcass, something that not a picture, because unfortunately now with all these things that you could doctor a picture, I'm talking here solid, undeniable proof. Okay. And I think about the only thing that would be solid and undeniable would be either a dead or a live animal, or if you want to call them animal, I don't know what to, if you capture one alive or if you capture one dead. Okay, that I think right now is about the only thing that would be considered proof. Anything else would be like, there would be too much wiggle room in there. Again, I think that there's, for all the times that the science or the academics say, we'll believe you when this happens, I don't think that there's a lot of people out there, whether it's, you want to talk about the academics, the science, that would not be a welcome proof. Contrary to what a lot of people think, especially, let's say, when they go out there and they're hunting for Bigfoot, or they're hunting for a dogman or a cryptid sighting. God knows there's a lot of other cryptids. They're thinking, once I find that proof, then that's it. Whether it's fame, fortune, or I'll be the person that discovered the blah, 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 whatever it is. I think that sometimes people don't think that there could be quite a negative downside to being the person or part of the group that comes back with this evidence. Here it is. You want to hear it is. And we were even discussing, let's say you go down like he said, of course, unfortunately, you have people that, I want to shoot it and then stuff it and then put it on the wall and then, whatever. But, people don't sometimes realize that you don't think that somewhere along the line, well, as a matter of fact, it doesn't take much to imagine it, where you could be thinking, did you kill a sentient being? By this I mean not like a wolf or an animal, where, as in murder, people go, but well, now how could, I guarantee you kill something that's kind of human, seeking your fame and fortune kind of deal, and you could very, very, very well find yourself embroiled in some type of legal battle where you might find yourself being accused of murdering this thing. And of course, people could duke it out and say, well, there's no law or whatever. But what I'm saying is that I'm sure that there would probably be people saying, man, if I knew that this was going to happen to me, I would never have gone searching for this proof, killing it, or whatever. Because again, I could see that happening, where you would say, well, why did you shoot it? Or why did you kill it? Well, it was attacking me. How do we know that? Where's your proof? These things are known for being in the woods, and they never attacked other people that we know of. So why would we believe that you shot it in self-defense? Okay. And people think that's far-fetched. And it's not. I'm telling you, it's not. It's not. it would really, I mean, and even then, and then if you want to go a step further, like, would there be anybody that would say, you know what, let's go down the what is it, the rabbit hole, the road less traveled here. Who's to say you don't get a visit from Men in Black? And this is, when I say Men in Black, I'm not, yeah, I could be the, you know, the stereotypical Men in Black, but you get visited by some people that very nicely but very firmly tell you, we're going to take your evidence and you're never going to say another word about it, or else. And people go, wow, Marlene, that's way out there. Really? Really? Not really. Not really, because at the end of the day, we really don't know what, you know, what would come with it. What if, let's go to movie time. Let's go movie land time. What if they've been studying these animals, but they haven't captured one, and or whatever, and they're like, okay. Or as long as people keep running around saying they've seen it, but nobody's ever been able to produce proof, we're good. But here comes along, lucky you, and you're the one that, like I said, killed it, live one, whatever. And what if you had what if the government doesn't want this to be known? Because again, whether you have a population that wigs out, because then it's like, okay, so what else is out there that's real? Or what if they had plans for this thing? What if they were looking at, again, let's go out there, you know, let's play the hypothetical. What if they are thinking, man, we've considered that if we could get these animals and make them super soldiers, okay, what could we do with an army of robots, drones, you know, when we talk about mechanical, you know, soldiers, war, and this, we would be invincible. Or at the very least to know we have this in our arsenal of defense. Or we really don't know what we would do, but we want to keep that possibility available to us. But here comes along the, you know, this person, you or whoever, wants to publish on YouTube a video of the dog man they captured, that they have, or whatever, or the carcass. Yeah. If you don't think that you would be getting a visit from some agency that probably nobody even knows of, I got news for you. There's a good possibility. I mean, there's a lot of things that come with it. It's just not the discovery part of it. It's what comes with it. And sometimes what looks like it would be really, really simple, or like, man, who wouldn't want this to be known? Who wouldn't want to publish this? I'm going to give you a perfect, for instance. Look at this thing that's happening with UFOs. Now, after how many years, is the government actually admitting that they have a program to monitor them, because they have so many reports from eyewitnesses, as in pilots, that these people are not making this up, that they finally had to put money into a program. And now is when they're coming around kind of to admitting, yeah. And by the way, you know, when they look at them as unidentified flying objects, they never go far enough away to say it comes from another planet. It's something we can't identify. And even then, it's almost like a very cautious, like, yeah, we've had this program. Because basically, you know, we've run out of excuses for not pursuing it. For how long? You don't think that many years before now, that some of those films have been released? People that have seen stuff or actually collected evidence didn't get a visit. And I'm not talking about the people that the stories are publicized, you know, but, you know, people that the military or people that said, oh, I got to visit. All the other ones that really took the stuff like, I'm not talking about this because I'm not going to put my life in danger. I'm not going to put my family's life in danger. And they just, when they get that visit, say, give us what you have, whatever proof you have. And by the way, you're never going to talk about this to anybody. And guess what? People say, yeah, okay, don't worry about it. And they don't say anything else about it. And I think that's happened. Okay, and people are like, do I really want to find out? Do I really want to call their bluff and find out what they're going to do or what's going to come that if I decide to open my big mouth? No, I'm not going to do that. I'll just like live the rest of my days and, maybe amongst the family members it's whispered, but that's the extent of it. Same thing here with the cryptids. And if you think about it, for all we know, this has already happened. Maybe there is somebody or more than one person who's collected that type of evidence, as in a body, a carcass, a live, and it just never made the light of day because they got a visit from somebody that said, guess what? You're never going to talk about this, and we're taking that thing or whatever, and we're leaving. And they were probably not given much of a choice. That's the end of that. And they might sit there and watch TV and watch all these documentaries and all these shows about all these cryptids and everything, and people running around trying to gather proof, and they're like, yeah, I know there is, but I can never say anything else about it. But as long as you were running around almost capturing it, you're okay. But once you go into that area where you've actually have collected tangible proof, everything changes. So who's to say nobody out there has had that experience, has collected that proof, and they were told to be quiet, shut up, and give me your proof. End of story. Let me tell you something. I don't know for sure, but that seems plausible. I think it's plausible. And it's almost like, for lack of a better word, it's almost like your safety lies in your ignorance. As long as you are running around trying to gather the evidence and you don't have it, you're good. It's like, yeah, all right, go ahead. Go in the woods. All right. Mm-hmm. Until the one day that you do. Mm-hmm. And some people will say, oh, Marlene, that's so conspiracy theorist kind of deal. And I'm like, no. You know what? I think sometimes a lot of things come out eventually when, of course, everybody that's involved is either really old or dead, so it doesn't matter. And people are like, huh? And I think, I truly believe that when it comes to a lot of these different, what they consider fringe theories, whether it's UFOs or ghosts or cryptids, that there's people out there that have actually either formulated, collected proof, something, and the powers that be pay them a visit, and they just, these people, they either, if it's not for themselves, it's because of their families. They just say, you know what, I would like to be the one to claim the fame of this, but the truth is, I'd rather be alive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If I had to make a choice, I'd rather be alive. So, anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. I know I love speaking to Chris. He's fascinating. He's very, very knowledgeable about this. He's been doing this for years and years and years. And again, I'm going to have a link to his website on the credits of the show. So please make sure to visit his site. He also did give out that information. And, again, this is when you've been doing this for a lot of years, you, as a researcher, you see a lot of things and you learn to, and in other words, you consider all sources. because sometimes you run across that one story, even if it's urban myth, that does have some truth in it. And that's what I like about it, because we were talking about that before we started recording, about the different ways that he gets stories, whether it's like an actual eyewitness or whether it's retold like a family thing, or even folklore, some areas that sometimes the origin's forgotten. He's researched all of that. So again, guys, thank you for being so wonderful, for being so part of my audience. And I know it's going to be staggered a little bit, but for all of you, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and wishing you all the best for you and your family. Take care.